Hi, I'm David Roskoff, and I am a automation addict. I'm going to go through and show you how to just create a simple automation using WebDriver and Microsoft Visual Studio and using the language C Sharp. Um, so first off, let's go ahead and go to File. We're going to go New. We're going to go to Project. We're going to create a new project. In this project, we're going to rename it to, in this specific example, I'm going to do automation 101. That'll be the name of my project. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in the location of learning and automation 101. I click OK. It's going to create the project for me. While it's creating it, one of the things you'll notice is I created a unit test project as opposed to a class project. And the reason why I create a unit test project is because if I create a unit test project, then I can integrate that with NPM later on. Whereas a regular class project, I can't do that way. There's some hidden keys in the project type. So this will give me my basic test framework here for creating tests that I'm going to be running. Now I need something to actually um, interact with the browser. And for the interacting with the browser, I'm going to use WebDriver. So I'm going to go to seleniumhq.org, which will take you to docs.seleniumhq.org. If I go to documentation, if I go to download, under download, you'll see there's a Selenium client and WebDriver language bindings. There's a C Sharp version. You're going to want to click download next to the C Sharp version. It's going to download a zip folder. You're going to want to open it, and you're going to want to extract the zip folder into a file. Now, once you've extracted it, you're going to go back into your project. You're going to go to your Solution Explorer. I have mine docked here on the right. It may be different for you, but in your Solution Explorer, you're going to see basically the outline of your project. And if you go to References, you right-click on it and say Add Reference. And you click Browse. And here I've already got it mapped. You're going to go to the folder that you've extracted to, and then you're going to go to Net40. Under Net40, you're going to see 4 DLLs. You're going to select all 4, and you're going to select Add, and then you're going to select OK. And this will add all 4 of those DLLs on the right here. So if you look under References, there's WebDriver, there's Selenium Core, and then WebDriver, and then WebDriver.support. These will be used in the automation. Next, we need to add a reference in our test to the framework that we just referenced, and so the reference is open qa.selenium, and you also do open qa.selenium and for this example, I'm going to use Firefox. This is the browser that I'm going to use, and so I'm going to actually put in the using statement here that I'm using Firefox. Now, first thing I'm going to do, under the class, I'm going to go ahead and, well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on unit test 1, because it's kind of a bad name. I'm going to go down to refactor, and I'm going to say rename. This is ReSharper, which is going to rename it for me. And I'm going to name this to Mormon.org, because that's the website. I'm going to go, we'll do my testing again. And now I'll click Next. And so now I have a Mormon.org.class. Under this here, I'm going to create a test. Let's look at our test real quick. So, the test is going to be, we're going to go to Mormon.org. We're going to click on people. We're going to search for a female who is the age of 18-24 and who is a biker. So I click search. Then we're going to C1 and Darcy bogus. And then I'm going to look at Darcy, and I'm going to check to see that she does, in fact, is a biker. And in her title there, she has biker, and she also has bike here, and within her page. And so that's going to be our test, and that's going to be our search in. If we find her and we find that she's into bikes, then we'll call the test good. If we don't find anything, then we'll call it a fail. So we're going to say find female biker. It's going to be the name of my test. Now, what this is using here is a test class and test method. This is referencing the unit testing framework that comes with Visual Studio. Test class basically just defines that this is a testing class, and in the test class you're going to have a lot of test methods, and for each test method you're going to have a method underneath it. And for every method that's going to contain tests that it's going to run, it's going to need that tag test method. So here we're actually going to start in our class. I'm going to go ahead and declare my WebDriver, or instantiate my WebDriver. So to do that, I'll do iWebDriver, driver equals new Firefox driver. As you can see, I can pick from a lot of different drivers. The one I'm going to use is Firefox because that's going to run the Firefox browser. When this instantiates, it's actually going to launch the Firefox browser. And then anytime I use driver, it's actually going to interact with that Firefox browser. And so in my code, the first thing, this is where a lot of people fall short, is when they start using automation, and sometimes the animation goes so fast that it can't actually find objects. So I'm going to go ahead and solve that problem right up front. And to do that, I'm going to do driver.manage.timeouts. Implicitly wait. And that's going to be the amount of time that's going to wait for an element to show up. And I'm going to do timespan dot from seconds. And then I'm going to put in the value. I'm going to have it wait for at least 5 seconds. If it can't find something within 5 seconds, then go ahead and throw me an error. For purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and add comments to my code. If you do a double / in C#, it'll add a comment. This is just has nothing to do with the code itself. It's just a nice little note that I can put in for people who want to read my code. So this one's going to set timeout for elements. That'll just make it wait a little bit longer if it can't find a specific drop down or a text box on the page. So first thing I'm going to do, first thing I did in my test is I went to mormon.org. To do that, we do driver dot navigate dot go to URL. And you would put in http:/mormon.org. That'll take you to the site. The next thing we did when we went to the site is we clicked on the people. Now, in order to do that, what you need to do is you hit F12. F12 will launch your developer tools. In this specific version, I'm using Firefox, and I'm using Firebug, which is a developer tool, and Firepath, which is an extension to Firebug. I recommend that you install and use both of those. This blue arrow here is a spy, and so if I click on the blue arrow with the box, and then hover over the element I want to work with, so this one, the people, it'll show me in the DOM what that element is. And so here, that element I'm looking at is an A element, which is a link element, and that link element has an ID of top nav our people. Now IDs for the most part are unique, meaning that there's only one element with that particular ID. There shouldn't, if your developers are developing correctly, there shouldn't be situations where an ID is used for multiple elements, but sometimes that isn't quite followed. So in this case, we have an ID, and this is the element I want to click on. So I'm going to first add my comment, click on people link or menu item. To do that, I'm going to do driver.findElement. So every tag in here that creates this page, whether it's an A tag or a span tag or a div tag, all of those are considered elements. What webdriver does is it allows you to interact with those elements. So this one, I'm going to get it at web elements. I'm going to find element by, and I have a lot of different choices here. Since this one has an ID, I'm going to go ahead and go with an ID. For most situations, if your element has an ID, then that's the one you're going to want to use. If it doesn't have an ID, then there'll be other ways to find those elements, and we'll get into that here in a minute, because not every element in our test is going to have an ID. So that's going to click on people. I'm going to follow the test. I'm going to click on people. I'm just going to take me to this page. Next thing I need to do is I'm going to want to set the gender attribute. Now, here, on the gender attribute, so this is a select. And a select has a lot of different options in it. So you can see here, option M is male, option F is female. If I actually click on the drop down, those are the items that are in the drop down. Now, if I wanted to select female, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send WebDriver to this option element here. Now, this option element has a value of F. Now, for this situation, I'm going to go ahead and use a CSS selector. So CSS selector, you just say option, and then in brackets, you put in the attribute. So in our case, the attribute here is value equals, and then whatever that attribute equals. And so in my case, my attribute equals an F. Now you're going to use single quotes over the F. When you do this, when you press enter, it's going to go ahead and select the female option. And that's what I want. The other thing I want is I just want one matching node. So that's going to be my CSS selector. If I go back here, I'm going to say set gender to female. Driver.findElement by, now this one's not ID, and instead I use a CSS selector, and that is the value, that is the equation or the text string that represented the CSS selector I used. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on that option to set it. The other thing I did is I set age to 18 to 24. So I set this to female, I set my age 18 to 24. And again, if I were to spy on the elements, age, so here's the select, and under the select are the different options. And the value for this one is going to be 18 to 24. And so here I would do a similar thing, right, where I would do driver.findElement by CSS selector. But this time I'm going to do option value equals 18 through 24. And I'm going to click on that element. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the keyword to biker. To do that, I'm going to spy on that biker text box there. And this one has an ID, so I'm going to go ahead and use the ID for that. The ID is search name keyword. I'm just going to copy that. Set keyword to biker. Now this one, instead of clicking, I'm going to do, this one has an action called send keys. What send keys does is it's going to basically be as if you're typing on the keyboard, having that element selected. And so if I wanted to hit, if I wanted to use special keys, I could do keys dot, and these are a list of keys that I could use, down arrow, up arrow, left, I could do enter. In this specific example, I'm just going to put in text. So I just put in a string and I say biker. And that's going to set the search name key element to biker. Last, I'm going to have to click on the search button. So let's look at and see how we can click on our search button. Now this one has a class, search people, and it also has a value of search and a type of submit. So this one, since it has a class of search people and it's the only button that matches that class, I'm going to go ahead and use that. So I'm going to say click search driver.findElement by class name search people. Sometimes you may not want to use that because class names are usually not unique. In this case it was, but in most cases it's not. So usually you wouldn't want to use class name, but nevertheless it's an option. So that's going to click search. And then we're going to want to click on this profile link. And so I'm probably going to look for here is a dev class called Spotlight. There's also a link, big profile link. And yeah, actually this link, big profile link, I think that's the class I'm going to use. So I'm going to say click on profile, driver.findElements by class name. Since that was a class, I'll use class name. I'll take out this period here. This period actually is in front of the class name on that. There is a big there's one problem though, is WebDriver doesn't see spaces very well. So to do this one, actually will end up doing CSS selector, and I will put the period in there. CSS selectors will recognize multiple classes. What happens is you can have an element represent multiple classes. WebDriver has a problem seeing class names with spaces. And so to get around that, I just use a CSS selector as opposed to a class name. And so I just copied the CSS selector, which is right here, represents this class, and I just pasted that in there. And then I'm going to click. So I'm going to click on the profile, and last I'm going to check profile for text, biker, or bike. Well, I should say biking or biker or bike. Because if it's biker, then it'll automatically contain text bike. Now to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and simulate that. I'm going to click on profile. On this page here, I'm going to select, there's an intro section, and then there's a section called content. It looks like the section called content will tackle all these paragraphs and text. And so I'm going to go with that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get an element, driver.findElement by ID. And this one, the ID for that whole section was content. And so I'm going to put content in there. Now this one, I'm going to do text. If the text attribute here, or the text property here, is going to return the text of that element, any of the elements that are underneath that element. And so that should give you a nice big log of what that whole section is saying. Now I'm going to want to throw that element into a string, so page text equals this. So I'm going to assert that later on. And then one of the other things I'm going to do is I'm also going to, after text, I'm going to do dot. I'm going to do to lower. What this will do, because I don't really care about case sensitivity, meaning if it's uppercase B or lowercase b for bike or biker. And so I'm just going to set whatever content I get from the page lowercase, and then I'll just check for the lowercase versions. Last, I'll do assert. Assert, this is going to be basically the assert sort of thing that has the pass or fail. This either works or doesn't work. I'm going to say is true. So this is going to check that the following statement is true. So this following statement is going to be page text dot contains. So this is going to check to see if the page contains a certain text. I'm going to look for the text biking in lowercase, and or I'm also going to look for page text that contains bike. Now you could leave your assert just like that, and it'll run just fine. It'll check. What this will do is, if it contains biking, it'll return true. If it contains bike, it'll return true, in which case this test will pass. But if either one of these, if both of these don't return true, meaning that the page text isn't contained the words biking or bike, then it's going to fail the test. In case it fails the test, I'm going to go ahead and have it say bike or biking should not be found on page. And that's an error message that it'll send back in the case that this assertion fails. And that's my basic test here, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to right click on the test method, and I'm going to say debug test. The run test and debug test, the difference is that debug test, if there's an error with your test, it'll stop the code and it'll help you to debug through it in case you have an error. Run test is going to run the test and give you results without stopping or leaving down which lines of code are erroring out. So since this is the first time I've run, I'm going to go ahead and debug through it. So now it's going to run my test. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to open up Firefox. It's then going to set my timeout, which you're not going to see. It's then going to go to Mormon.org. It's going to click on people. It should now set the gender and the age and the text, the biker. It's then going to click on the first page, and then it's going to check and see that the text is there. If I go to my Test Explorer, you can see that Find Female Biker passed. It took 14 seconds to run. And that is the very first test, a very simple test to run. I've covered CSS selectors, and I've covered IDs and class names. And I will go into more detail about in the future, but this is your very basic Automation 101. Have a good day.